There's something you need to understand about Capricorns before we go any further. They don't just survive life, they master it, not through shortcuts or luck, but through sheer consistency, focus, and grit. You've probably seen it. That one person in the room who doesn't say much but always delivers. The one who doesn't need attention, but somehow commands respect. That's Capricorn energy. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's real. In a world full of noise, Capricorns are the signal. See, while most people are reacting to whatever comes their way, Capricorns are building, quietly, steadily, brick by brick. They don't need applause. They're not here for validation. They're here for results. And when you understand how they move, what they refuse to do, what they simply won't tolerate, you start to see why they're always 10 steps ahead. This video isn't just a list. It's a look into the mind of the Zodiac's most grounded, disciplined sign. Whether you're a Capricorn yourself or someone who's ever been baffled by one, you're about to learn the code they live by and why it sets them apart from everyone else. But before we dive deep, do this one thing for us. Subscribe to Secret of the Zodiac. We're building a community for the ones who don't just believe in the stars. They want to understand them. Hit that like button if you respect that Capricorn mindset, and let us know in the comments where you see it showing up in your life or someone else's. Now let's get into it. Because when most people tap out or spiral into drama, Capricorns, they do something completely different. Number 1, a Capricorn does not quit halfway through a goal, ever. This isn't some motivational slogan they live by. It's embedded in their DNA. It's a survival mechanism. When a Capricorn commits to something, whether it's a degree, a promotion, a personal transformation, or building a business, they lock in. And once that mental switch flips, there's no turning it off. They don't rely on bursts of motivation. They build discipline. It's the kind of inner engine that keeps going long after the emotional spark is gone. When others are tapping out because it's too much, a Capricorn is rolling up their sleeves and getting even more focused. Imagine a Capricorn working on a long-term goal. For months, they wake up early, put in the time, do the research, learn from failure, and adjust their methods without drama. They're not chasing perfection. They're committed to the process. If you check in with them a year later, they're still at it, only stronger, sharper, and further ahead. Why? Because giving up would mean betraying their own standards, and that's something a Capricorn simply won't do. Now contrast that with the world around them. People are constantly jumping ship on their plans, their routines, even their relationships, at the first sign of discomfort. But Capricorns, they don't just endure difficulty, they expect it. They factor it in. It's part of their blueprint. Capricorns understand something most people don't. Consistency isn't always exciting, but it's the secret weapon behind every real achievement. This is why Capricorns are often seen as older souls, even at a young age. They don't look for shortcuts. They don't need immediate praise. They play the long game, knowing that while the rest of the world chases dopamine, they're building a future that lasts. If you've ever tried to convince a Capricorn to give up on something they believe in, you already know it's pointless. You might as well try to move a mountain, because that's exactly who they are. Immovable, steady, and grounded in their own vision. That brings us to the second thing most people do, but a Capricorn never does. Number 2, overshare. Now let's pause here. We live in an era where oversharing is the norm. People post their every thought, every conflict, every emotion. It's not uncommon to scroll through your feed and see someone unraveling publicly, venting about their relationships, exposing their fears, broadcasting personal drama in real time. But a Capricorn, you won't see that. Capricorns guard their privacy like a vault. They're not mysterious to be cute. They're private because they understand the value of protecting their inner world. When a Capricorn is going through something, you might not even know it. They process deeply but silently. Not because they lack emotion, but because they respect emotion. They treat it as sacred. They don't believe everyone deserves access to their inner life, their dreams, their fears, their heartbreaks. That's not public property. That's not for casual consumption. While others spill their souls in public comments or dramatic captions, Capricorns are moving quietly, intentionally. It's not about fear, it's about focus. They know that every moment spent performing their feelings for others is a moment they could be using to actually heal, to strategize, to move forward. Emotional exposure makes some people feel alive, but for Capricorns, it's a risk, one they rarely take. This also makes them incredibly trustworthy. If a Capricorn tells you something personal, understand this: they didn't just casually open up. That was earned. And once you're in that inner circle, they'll protect your secrets like they do their own. But here's what really sets them apart. Their refusal to overshare isn't just emotional, it's tactical. They know that too much exposure makes you vulnerable to manipulation. People can twist your words, weaponize your pain, or root against your success if you give them too much access. Capricorns don't give anyone that kind of power. They understand that power often thrives in silence. The less people know, the less they can interfere. And that silence, it allows Capricorns to recalibrate, to regroup, and to rise without outside noise clouding their judgment. This isn't just about being low-key. It's about protecting the integrity of their path. And that path is usually long, deliberate, and paved with decisions most people wouldn't have the patience or discipline to make. So while the world shouts, overshares, and collapses under the weight of their own performative transparency, Capricorns keep building, quietly, powerfully. They know that when the time is right, their results will speak louder than any story ever could. And that mindset leads us straight into the next two things Capricorns will never do. Number 3, Capricorns don't chase trends without purpose. We're living in a time where trends rule everything. A single post goes viral, and suddenly everyone's doing the same thing, wearing the same outfit, mimicking the same advice, often without even thinking about why. It's fast, it's flashy, it's addictive, and for many people, it feels like the only way to stay relevant. But not for Capricorns. They don't chase what's hot. They commit to what's solid, even if it means being misunderstood in the moment. While other signs might jump headfirst into the latest lifestyle, career fad, or even spiritual trend, Capricorns pause. They ask, does this align with who I am and where I'm going? They don't move unless there's a real reason to. And that restraint, that patience, it's their superpower. Think about how rare that is today. Someone who can stay grounded in a world built to distract you. Someone who can say, no thanks, not because they're scared or stubborn, but because they've already seen the ending to this movie. They've seen people pour time, money, and energy into something just because it was popular, only to burn out or regret it later. Capricorns would rather be late to a trend and build something meaningful than be early and empty-handed when it collapses. Even on social media, you can see this difference. While many people curate their identity based on what's trending, jumping from aesthetic to aesthetic, belief system to belief system, Capricorns are consistent. They're not out here trying to impress anyone. They're building a brand of substance. You'll rarely catch them switching up their goals because of what's hot. They're focused on what works and what lasts. And that's not always easy. Being grounded in a trend-obsessed world can feel lonely. While others are getting quick praise and engagement, Capricorns are often working behind the scenes, stacking quiet wins no one sees. But they're okay with that, because they know that when the hype fades, and it always does, they'll still be standing. And this doesn't mean Capricorns are anti-change or anti-growth. Far from it. They're just discerning. They'll embrace new ideas, but only if those ideas are rooted in truth and utility. If there's no real return, mentally, emotionally, financially, they're out. They don't follow the crowd. They follow the course they've mapped out for themselves. Which brings us to another powerful distinction. Number 4, Capricorns don't make decisions on a whim. You ever meet someone who tells you they just felt like doing it? They got a sudden impulse and acted on it. Booked a trip, quit a job, ended a relationship, joined a movement without much thought. For some, that spontaneity is thrilling. It gives them a sense of freedom. But to a Capricorn, that kind of impulsive behavior is borderline reckless. Capricorns treat decisions like investments. They consider risk, timing, impact, and return. And not just for themselves, for everyone involved. They understand that every yes is also a no to something else. Every choice has consequences, and because of that, they don't rush anything. This is especially true in relationships. While other signs might dive into something new just because the chemistry is strong, Capricorns take a beat. They want to know if there's compatibility beyond the surface. They ask themselves, does this person align with my values? Will they grow with me? Can they handle my ambition, my vision, my silence? It might take them longer to open up, but when they do, it's real, it's grounded, and it's built to last. That same thinking shows up in their careers. Capricorns won't jump ship just because a job looks good on paper. They'll research, they'll study the company, the leadership, the long-term growth. They're not interested in titles. They're interested in trajectory. They want to build something, not bounce from one shiny thing to the next. And when they do make a decision, you can trust it's been thought through from every angle. Of course, this calculated nature has its downside. Capricorns can sometimes overthink. They can get stuck in analysis mode, afraid to move without certainty. But here's the thing, they know this about themselves, and when they do finally act, it's powerful, it's with clarity, and it rarely needs to be reversed. They move slow, but they hit hard. This trait often gets misunderstood. Some people think Capricorns are rigid or boring, but ask anyone who's watched a Capricorn build a life, a career, or a legacy, and they'll tell you, there's nothing boring about being strategic. There's nothing boring about being unstoppable. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Capricorns don't just avoid impulsive decisions for themselves. They struggle to trust people who make those kinds of choices too often. If you're constantly changing your mind, switching directions, or living in chaos, they'll keep their distance. Not because they judge you, but because they can't build with you. They know that anything real requires consistency. And if your energy doesn't match that, they'll pull back. Because for Capricorns, life is a structure, and every decision is a brick. If the foundation is weak, they won't keep building. They'll stop, rethink, rebuild, and this time, they'll do it better. So while others are out here winging it, Capricorns are out here winning it. They're secret. They don't chase trends, and they don't move without intention. They are the architects of their own lives, and they don't waste a single stone. And that same refusal to compromise on vision, on timing, on values is exactly what leads us into the next two Capricorn non-negotiables. Number 5, stay in their comfort zone. Most people are wired for safety. They find a routine that works and they stick with it, even if it no longer serves them. Even if they're quietly unhappy, uninspired, or unfulfilled, the fear of the unknown keeps them frozen. Change is scary and comfort feels safe. But for Capricorns, comfort is not the goal. Growth is. Capricorns are one of the few signs that actually seek discomfort because they know it's the birthplace of transformation. They understand that real progress only happens when you push yourself past what's easy and into what's possible. And that journey, it's messy, it's tough, it's far from glamorous, but it's also where the magic happens. Capricorns are climbers. It's no coincidence their symbol is the mountain goat, not the house cat, not the lounging lion. The goat, it climbs, it rises, it adapts to terrain most wouldn't dare step on. Why? Because it's not afraid of falling. It's afraid of not moving at all. So while others spend their lives avoiding risks, Capricorns actively seek out situations that stretch them. A tougher job, a harder challenge, a more demanding responsibility. They don't shy away from what scares them. They lean in because they know what most people forget. Growth and comfort never coexist. Even in relationships, this trait shows up. Capricorns don't want something that just feels good. They want something that builds them, that challenges them to be better, that holds them accountable, that evolves with them. And if they find themselves in something that feels too easy, too routine, too predictable, they question it, not out of restlessness, but out of purpose. They know stagnation kills dreams. They know that anything worth having will test you, stretch you, and sometimes even break you open, and they're okay with that. While the rest of the world avoids growing pains, Capricorns treat them as stepping stones. And this brings us to another deeply defining trait of the Capricorn spirit. Number 6, trust too quickly. Let's be honest, fast trust is a cultural addiction. We meet someone, we like their vibe, and suddenly we're telling them everything. People confuse openness with connection, but Capricorns, they're not here for quick bonds built on shallow ground. For them, trust is earned, slowly, intentionally, with actions, not just words. Capricorns can be warm, they can be kind, they can be incredibly supportive, but that doesn't mean you're in. Getting into a Capricorn's inner circle is like getting past security at a high-level summit. You don't just stroll in, you get vetted. They'll notice how you move, what you say, what you don't say, how you handle failure, how you treat people you don't need. They're not paranoid, they're perceptive, and they've learned, often the hard way, that not everyone who smiles at you is safe to let into your life. You see, Capricorns are protectors of their time, their energy, their peace. They know how hard they've worked to become who they are, and they're not about to hand that access to someone who hasn't proven they deserve it. This isn't about being cold, it's about being wise. It's about being strategic with intimacy. Because Capricorns know that once someone gets inside your emotional space, they can either elevate you or derail you, so they choose wisely. That's why, even in love, Capricorns take their time. They might be slow to open up, they might keep a little emotional distance at first, but it's not a lack of feeling. It's depth, it's discernment. They want to see who you are without the honeymoon glow. They want to know if your values align with theirs, if your words hold up under pressure, if you're steady when life gets messy, and when someone proves they're consistent, dependable, and honest, then the wall comes down, slowly, genuinely, fully. And if you're lucky enough to earn that trust, it's one of the most solid things you'll ever experience. A trusted Capricorn is fiercely loyal. They'll go to war for you. They'll show up without needing to be asked. They'll protect you like family. But lose that trust, that door closes, and it rarely reopens. Capricorns don't do the cycle of hurt and forgive, hurt and forgive. They're not built for emotional chaos. Once you show them who you are, especially if it contradicts your words, they believe you and they move on. They don't explode, they don't beg, they detach. Because for them, boundaries aren't just a buzzword, they're a practice. They understand that protecting their peace sometimes means losing people, and they've made peace with that. This is why Capricorns can sometimes seem emotionally distant, but beneath that calm exterior is a mind calculating, testing, reading between the lines. They don't expect perfection, but they do expect honesty, integrity, consistency. If those are missing, the connection is dead before it ever really begins. And in a world that moves fast and forgets faster, Capricorns are a powerful reminder that trust isn't a right, it's a responsibility. So while others open up easily and get burned repeatedly, Capricorns move with care. They don't give away their energy to just anyone. And because of that, when they do trust you, it means something. And it's exactly that kind of emotional intelligence, that high standard for connection, that brings us to the next pair of things Capricorns simply won't tolerate. Number 7, neglect their long-term vision. A lot of people live for the moment, and there's beauty in that, sure. But some take it to the extreme, making decisions based only on what feels good now, without thinking about the price they'll pay tomorrow. They chase instant gratification, temporary highs, and short-term wins. But Capricorns, they're different. Capricorns are future-focused in a way that can feel almost foreign to others. They think about how today's choices will ripple into next year or the next 10. Whether they're choosing a partner, a job, or a financial move, their question is always the same. Will this still make sense for me down the road? This isn't about fear, it's about responsibility. They've seen how quickly things can fall apart when the foundation is weak. They've seen people regret decisions made in haste, and they don't want to be another cautionary tale. So they slow down, they think ahead, and they move with purpose. That's why you'll rarely see a Capricorn waste time on something or someone that doesn't align with where they're going. They don't take detours just to kill time. They have too much respect for their energy and too much clarity about what they're building. They want progress, not just motion. And that means turning down paths that might be fun now, but would cost them later. Even in love, this applies. A Capricorn won't entertain someone who doesn't fit into the future they see. It's not about status, it's about alignment. If your presence today threatens their peace or progress tomorrow, they'll walk away, and they won't look back. They've got dreams, but more importantly, they've got a strategy. And that strategy, it's rooted in patience, discipline, and long-term reward. They aren't afraid to be the one who says no to something good now in order to say yes to something great later. They don't need everything at once. They just need it to be right. You won't find them spending recklessly, jumping into risky deals, or entertaining relationships that derail their momentum. They guard their path with the kind of vigilance most people reserve for guarding their hearts. Because to a Capricorn, the vision isn't optional, it's sacred. Number 8, let emotions cloud their judgment. Now let's be clear, Capricorns feel deeply. They're not robots, but they've learned, often through painful experience, that emotions can be deceiving. Passion can blur logic, fear can block opportunity, hurt can lead to destruction. That's why Capricorns don't make major decisions when emotions are high. They press pause, they take space, they breathe, they listen, but they don't let their feelings take the wheel. This doesn't mean they suppress or ignore what they feel. They honor their emotions, but they don't obey them blindly. They know there's a difference between processing your emotions and being run by them. When conflict hits, they don't lash out, they think. When disappointment shows up, they don't spiral, they reassess. And when love enters the picture, they take their time, because they know that what feels good in the moment isn't always what's best in the long run. This ability to step back and think critically, even when they're hurting, is what makes Capricorns such powerful decision makers. It's why they rarely crumble under pressure. They don't let a temporary storm wreck a lifetime of work. They can love you and still walk away. They can be angry and still speak with calm. They can be sad and still show up to work, make the plan, and keep life moving. They are emotional, but they are not emotionally driven. That level of self-regulation, that kind of balance, it's not easy. It's not something most people can do consistently. But for Capricorns, it's necessary because they've got things to build. And emotional chaos is expensive. Capricorns knows that one bad decision made in the heat of a moment can destroy months or even years of progress. So they take responsibility for how they react, and they protect their focus like a sacred flame. This doesn't mean they're emotionally unavailable. In fact, when a Capricorn opens up, it's intentional. Vulnerability isn't something they run from. It's something they respect, but they refuse to let emotions rule them. They believe feelings are to be acknowledged, processed, understood, but not worshipped. That's why Capricorns often end up being the calm voice in a storm, the one others turn to when things fall apart. They're the stabilizers, the ones who can hold space for emotion without being consumed by it. And in a world that often swings between emotional repression and emotional overwhelm, that kind of balance is rare. They don't judge others for being sensitive or spontaneous, but they do expect people to be responsible for how they handle their emotions because they've spent years mastering their own. This is the kind of self-mastery that isn't loud. It doesn't show off. It doesn't need praise, but it holds incredible power because while others may live at the mercy of their moods, Capricorns stay steady. And that steadiness, it's what allows them to lead, to succeed, to survive. And in a world full of chaos, that grounded presence is magnetic. It's also what sets the tone for the next 2 things you'll never catch a Capricorn doing. Number 9, abandon their standards to please others. This one might be one of the most defining traits of a Capricorn. In a world that's constantly begging you to water yourself down, just to be accepted, just to be liked, just to avoid conflict, Capricorns stand tall. They don't shrink, they don't contort, and they definitely don't betray their standards for applause. Most people at some point feel tempted to compromise. They say yes when they want to say no. They pretend to be okay with things they're not. They change themselves to match the energy around them. But Capricorns, they'd rather be alone than be fake. They'd rather be misunderstood than misaligned. They have rules for their lives, not because they're rigid, but because they know who they are, and they honor that. Their standards aren't just about romance or career. They show up everywhere. How they allow people to speak to them, what they tolerate in friendships, the boundaries they draw at work, the values they live by even when no one is watching. To them, compromising on their standards is like breaking a contract with their own soul. It's not an option. And here's the thing, this strength doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-respect. Capricorns have usually been through situations where they did lower the bar and paid the price. They learned the hard way that losing yourself to keep the peace only leads to internal war. So now, they don't move like that. They're not here to please. They're here to live with integrity. And if that means disappointing a few people along the way, so be it. Because at the end of the day, Capricorns aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of betraying themselves. They've learned that external validation is temporary, but self-alignment, that's priceless. And once a Capricorn finds that inner compass, nothing is worth throwing it off. This doesn't mean they never bend. Capricorns can compromise when it makes sense, but they'll never collapse their core for convenience. And that kind of self-rootedness is rare in a world obsessed with approval. Number 10, fake who they are to fit in. Let's be honest, it's easy to perform. It's easy to put on a version of yourself that others will like, to laugh at jokes you don't find funny, to agree with ideas you don't believe in, to dress, speak, and act in ways that are more palatable to the crowd around you. But that's not how Capricorns operate. Authenticity is one of their deepest values. They don't do masks. They don't do performances. What you see is what you get. And what you get is someone who's grounded in reality, not perception. This doesn't mean they're always outspoken. Capricorns can be quiet, reserved even, but they're real. They don't pretend to love something just because it's trending. They won't fake confidence just to impress you. And they won't hide their ambition, their standards, or their complexity to make others more comfortable. In fact, one of the reasons Capricorns often stand out, even when they're not trying to, is because they're one of the few people in the room who are unapologetically themselves. And yes, that can make them intimidating. People don't always know what to make of someone who's not performing, someone who's not begging to be liked, but that's okay. Capricorns aren't looking for validation. They're looking for connection, real connection, built on truth, not theatrics. They know that anyone who's worth having in their life will love them as they are. And if someone doesn't, that's not their problem to fix. They understand that performance is exhausting, that pretending to be something you're not, just to be accepted, is a betrayal of the highest kind. And they've learned that it's better to be alone and real than surrounded and hollow. You won't find Capricorns shape-shifting to match the crowd. If the room doesn't fit their energy, they'll leave. Not out of ego, but out of loyalty to their own spirit. They've done the work of figuring out who they are. They've sat in silence with their own thoughts. They've had to rebuild themselves after being misunderstood, overlooked, or underestimated. And that journey? It gave them something too valuable to ever trade in: self-definition. So when they walk into a room, they don't adjust themselves to match the mood. They bring their own. And whether that energy is welcomed or not, it doesn't matter, because they know their worth isn't up for debate. Capricorns don't perform. They present. They don't fake it. They own it. And in a world that constantly encourages people to become copies of each other, Capricorns remain originals. This commitment to realness, to values, to being whole no matter who's watching or what's trending, this is what makes them so magnetic. Even when they're quiet, even when they're reserved, there's something about someone who's undeniably themselves that draws others in. And it's this very quality, the refusal to dilute, to shrink, to play small, that sets the stage for the final two truths we need to cover. Number 11, lower their standards to make others comfortable. At first glance, this might sound similar to not abandoning their standards to please others, but it goes deeper. This isn't just about keeping boundaries. It's about unapologetically raising them even when it makes people uncomfortable. Capricorns don't just say, "This is what I need." They say, "This is what I require." And they mean it. Whether it's in relationships, career, or life, They operate with high expectations, not just of others, but of themselves. And they're not interested in lowering the bar to make someone feel better about not measuring up. In fact, they know that when you lower the bar for someone, you teach them to crawl instead of climb. Capricorns aren't in the business of enabling mediocrity. They're in the business of building excellence. Yes, this can intimidate people. Yes, it can drive some away. But that's fine, because Capricorns aren't here to be easy. They're here to be real. They're here to call people higher. They believe that if someone truly belongs in their life, they'll rise to meet them, not ask them to come down. This mindset is why you'll often see Capricorns walking alone. It's not that they're antisocial. It's just that they'd rather be solo at the top than surrounded at the bottom. They don't fear solitude. They fear shrinking themselves. They've seen how much damage can be done when people lower their standards in the name of love, loyalty, or fitting in. They've watched strong people give up their dreams to avoid making others feel insecure, and they've made a personal vow, never again. So no, they won't dim their ambition to protect your ego. They won't soften their voice to avoid being labeled intense. They won't slow their pace so you can keep up. Not because they're unkind, but because they refuse to betray their potential. Capricorns understand that high standards aren't about arrogance. They're about self-respect. And if their standards make someone uncomfortable, it's not their job to explain. It's that person's job to evolve. This leads us to the final Capricorn non-negotiable, one that ties all the others together in a perfect, unshakable loop. Number 12, fake who they are to fit in. Let's be honest, it's easy to perform. It's easy to put on a version of yourself that others will like, to laugh at jokes you don't find funny, to agree with ideas you don't believe in, to dress, speak, and act in ways that are more palatable to the crowd around you. But that's not how Capricorns operate. Authenticity is one of their deepest values. They don't do masks. They don't do performances. What you see is what you get. And what you get is someone who's grounded in reality, not perception. This doesn't mean they're always outspoken. Capricorns can be quiet, reserved even, but they're real. They don't pretend to love something just because it's trending. They won't fake confidence just to impress you, and they won't hide their ambition, their standards, or their complexity to make others more comfortable. In fact, one of the reasons Capricorns often stand out, even when they're not trying to, is because they're one of the few people in the room who are unapologetically themselves. And yes, that can make them intimidating. People don't always know what to make of someone who's not performing, someone who's not begging to be liked. But that's okay. Capricorns aren't looking for validation. They're looking for connection, real connection, built on truth, not theatrics. They know that anyone who's worth having in their life will love them as they are. And if someone doesn't, that's not their problem to fix. They understand that performance is exhausting, that pretending to be something you're not, just to be accepted, is a betrayal of the highest kind. And they've learned that it's better to be alone and real than surrounded and hollow. You won't find Capricorns shape-shifting to match the crowd. If the room doesn't fit their energy, they'll leave. Not out of ego, but out of loyalty to their own spirit. They've done the work of figuring out who they are. They've sat in silence with their own thoughts. They've had to rebuild themselves after being misunderstood, overlooked, or underestimated. And that journey? It gave them something too valuable to ever trade in: self-definition. So when they walk into a room, they don't adjust themselves to match the mood. They bring their own. And whether that energy is welcomed or not, it doesn't matter, because they know their worth isn't up for debate. Capricorns don't perform. They present. They don't fake it. They own it. And in a world that constantly encourages people to become copies of each other, Capricorns remain originals. This commitment to realness, to values, to being whole no matter who's watching or what's trending, this is what makes them so magnetic. Even when they're quiet, even when they're reserved, there's something about someone who's undeniably themselves that draws others in. If you've made it this far, one thing's clear: Capricorns aren't just another zodiac sign. They are a force, a blueprint, a reminder of what it means to live with structure, intention, and self-respect. Throughout this video, we walked through 12 things most people do, but a Capricorn never will. Not because they're trying to be different, but because they were built to be solid in a world that bends. Let's go back over what we've seen, because it deserves repeating. Number 1, they don't quit halfway through a goal. Capricorns finish what they start. Number 2, they don't overshare. Their privacy is a shield and a strategy. Number 3, they don't chase trends without purpose. Hype means nothing without substance. Number 4, they don't make decisions on a whim. Every move is measured. Number 5, they don't stay in their comfort zone. Growth is the goal, not safety. Number 6, they don't trust too quickly. Trust is earned and not assumed. Number 7, they don't neglect their long-term vision. They're always thinking 10 steps ahead. Number 8, they don't let emotions cloud their judgment. Feelings are processed, but never take the wheel. Number 9, they don't abandon their standards to please others. They protect their principles fiercely. Number 10, they don't fake who they are to fit in. What you see is real, always. Number 11, they don't lower their standards to make others comfortable. They lift the room instead of shrinking. Number 12, they don't perform. They show up as themselves no matter who's watching. This isn't a list of habits. It's a philosophy. It's the Capricorn code. While the world spins faster, louder, and shallower, Capricorns hold. They don't need applause. They don't crave noise. What they want is something that lasts, something honest, something real. So if you've watched this and you're thinking, this is me, or this explains someone I know, then now is the time. Subscribe to Secret of the Zodiac, because this isn't just a channel. This is a space we're building for people who want more than surface-level astrology. We're here for truth, for clarity, for depth. If you're Capricorn, if you love one, or if you've just come to respect this sign in a whole new way, don't walk away without subscribing. We post videos that are personal, raw, and real, and we're just getting started. Like this video, not just because it helps us in the algorithm, but because it shows us that this kind of content matters to you, that we should keep going deeper, that there's an audience out there who wants more of this. And comment. We're not asking for engagement just to boost numbers. We genuinely want to hear from you. What trait hit you hardest? Which of these Capricorn truths do you live by or struggle with? Is there something we missed that you think belongs on this list? Tell us in the comments. Start a conversation. Be part of this community. And finally, something important. If this video helped you see yourself more clearly, if it helped you understand someone else more deeply, if it gave you even a moment of peace, pride, or power, consider supporting the channel through the Super Thanks feature. That button is a direct way to say, I believe in this work, and it helps more than you know. Creating this kind of content takes time. It takes research, writing, editing, design, energy, and commitment. When you support us through Super Thanks, even with something small, you help us keep this going daily. You help us stay independent. You help us bring more truth, more clarity, and more voice to people who need it. You help make space for videos that mean something. So if you can, give. If you believe this message matters, support it. It allows us to grow this community and reach more people with real astrology that goes beyond the meme culture. And don't stop here. We have more videos waiting for you. Deep dives into all the signs, honest conversations about compatibility, purpose, identity, and growth. Go explore the channel. Watch what speaks to you. Share it with someone who needs it. Because at the end of the day, astrology isn't just about signs, it's about self-awareness. And Capricorns, they show us what self-awareness in action looks like. They're not perfect. They don't pretend to be. But they are real, relentless, rooted. And if this video helped you see that, if it helped you own that, then we've done our job. Subscribe, comment, support, watch more. We'll be right here, holding it down, bringing you more truths, one sign at a time. See you in the next video.